Hey, this is Tom, and today on the Mini Sculpting Super Show, we're going to continue with part 2 of the 2008 Sculpting Archives. The CHEM STIM soldier that I did for Reaper's CHRONOSCOPE line has a really interesting story from many facets. First of all, as you can see, you see this roughed out miniature here. This, and I did a sketch over. This was actually a miniature that I started for Magnificent Egos very late in their life cycle. They were kind of winding down. This was a miniature I was supposed to do for them. I got a little delayed, and so ended up not going forward with it, and then they ceased operations. Well, here I was, I had this large, I don't remember how, I think this guy was close to 40 millimeters tall, hunched over, and so I had this large figure that had a lot done to it. Great understructure, good pose, fun stuff like that going on, and I didn't know what to do with them. So when Reaper came out with their CHRONOSCOPE line, this kind of basically sci-fi, modern, just anything not fantasy, I thought this would be a great chance to finally realize a concept that I had drawn up or doodled up back in college for this, just by kind of like, I guess in a little bit like a Bane character from Batman, injecting these combat stims and things like that to make them a super battle warrior, and so that's what I did. I took this base thing and I pitched this idea to Reaper Ron, and he thought it was cool, loved it, and so I went about sculpting this figure, and it came out well. Obviously, it's different than the original concept art I did because, as you can see, the body styles are very different, but the essence of what the character is and everything is still there, and I think it turned out awesome. It's probably one of the more unique miniatures I've ever sculpted. I feel like it's not quite as derivative as a lot of the fantasy stuff I've done, especially the stuff that I've designed myself. So yeah, and this is one of my favorites I've done for Reaper, especially from the CHRONOSCOPE line. It's also kind of interesting to see that I went back to doing this guy entirely in green stuff. Not because I had to, but I think because I had done the body in green stuff, I'm like, well, I gotta finish him off in green stuff. And so that's what I did. Steve wanted to have a one-handed weapon with shield, and then a two-handed weapon character for both the Dragon Knights and the Knights of the Rose. So first one I ended up tackling was this Dragon Knight for Rusted Heroes. And again, I'm not a huge fan of how this one turned out. Technically, like the articulation and everything looks pretty cool, but some of the way the posing, it's not even the pose, it's more the kind of proportions, the way things worked out didn't quite come off too well. There was also a big challenge with these miniatures. So I didn't bring this up before, but kind of one of the interesting things Steve was doing with this line was he wanted the heads and the arms, the wrists, to be removable. Not at the wrist, a little higher, like basically the whole gauntlet. So where you would see the articulated going up onto the forearms, that's where the figure actually separates. And the idea was that you'd be able to interchange the heads or the weapons with many, if not all, of the miniatures. Now, with that said, when we were sculpting these, he didn't ask me or make me have to make sure everything lined up perfectly. So it was more, you would still have to be doing some conversion, but a lot of the work would be done. And I think this is more just for his own personal passion, because he's an exceptional painter and modeler, and this would allow him to be able to manipulate these guys and get more variety out of them. But I don't know, this one I struggled with, and in hindsight, I'm not sure why I didn't try and convert the original one. This is a completely new sculpt. I think did I even do? Yeah, I think that's a separate head. I think I did two. Yeah, because I did two style of helmets, because obviously you want variety. So So yeah, I didn't use the other one at all, which probably would have been a smart idea. Now to the Knight of the Rose one-handed weapon grunt, I love. And so maybe that was really the biggest challenge between working on the Knights of the Rose versus the Dragon Knights for Rusted Heroes was it was a lot more challenging to do the armor and whatnot for the Dragon Knights. There was articulation everywhere, and you're always on a time crunch when you're sculpting with putty. So where this I could sculpt and get the nice shape down, make everything smooth on the Knight of the Rose, and then it'd be done. Well, with the Dragon Knight, I had to get that shape all down, make it nice and smooth, and then I had to start working in articulation and whatnot. So it's a lot more challenging. So I think I still prefer the two-handed Knight of the Rose over this one, but only slightly. And that's really just because I think that giant mace and the giant twist in the body just make it so dynamic looking. But other than that, I mean, the armor and everything on this, I think, turned out great. Oh, and that little chain on the flail, that was fun. I think that turned out very well also. Those are always very challenging to do, chains. The MERC Heavy Assault sculpt is probably the most popular sculpture I've ever done. I've had more people come up and point it out to me and mention it, comment on it. It won a what was it? It was an honorable mention. It didn't quite place, but it was on TNG back before Cool Mini or Not owned it. They used to do these awards, and I got an honorable mention for this one. But this was where I felt like I really started to solidify, really start to branch out and kind of get my style going more. And again, Keith Lowe did the concept art for this, and I think part of it was because I just loved what he was drawing, what he was doing is exactly what I wanted to do. What we were shooting for with these miniatures was to kind of do American Infinity miniatures. Lots of detail, lots of cool action and dynamic stuff going on with them, but not quite the same sleek anime look that you see from Infinity. So this was also where I started to try and do, what's it called? Make precast parts. So this helmet here, it's a metal shell. I sculpted it separately where it doesn't have any of the antennas or any of the wraparound stuff, extra bits. It's just kind of a base, because when Keith and I first started concepting this, we thought it'd be cool to make everybody be a unique soldier. And so one of the things he did, was make all these different concepts for a bunch of different helmets, but he kind of made it off of this one base. And so what I could do is I could start with this base. It would be the right size and consistent, and then add on just the little unique parts. And that saved me a lot of time. When you're working with very technical things, it's very helpful to have pre-made parts where you can make sure size and consistency is maintained. You don't have to painstakingly get it to match every single time. My one regret on this figure is he is so hard to build. That was actually one of the things I was happiest about when this was remade into plastic, was the Chinese plastic manufacturers were able to retool him and cut him differently, and make much better slots and connectors for all the pieces, so he went together way easier. I'm sure anybody that has assembled this model will tell you it's awesome, but whew, it is tough to build. Once I finished the knight figures for Rusted Heroes lines, I was able to focus on some of the more common support troops. So here's the Dragon Knight Fusilier. This was fun to be able to do a kind of a fantasy musket blunderbuss kind of, well, I don't know, is Fusilier, that's a person, not a weapon. Anyways, a weapon like that. So I think he turned out pretty well. But I can tell as I was doing these miniatures that it was a real struggle to be able to make the multi-part gloves, if you will, where the arms cut off at the gloves onto the weapon. it was very tricky to get everything lined up just right, so arms didn't look a little too long. But I do like how this figure turned out overall more than that second night especially. I think it was not having to worry about all the articulation and whatnot and all the very special fine details of the armor allowed me to kind of focus on it and keep the integrity of the pose a little bit better. Now, while for once I liked how my Dragon Knight miniature came out more, in the case of the Knight of the Rose Fusilier, I wasn't as happy with this guy, which was a bummer because I really like the look of quilted Gambazon. It's ever since I came across Rockham and their Cadwallon miniatures, those Men-at-Arms sculpts were so cool. I just loved them to death. And I can't remember completely, but I'm thinking that I must have been struggling with this one because, as you see, the whole miniature's in Procreate except the main body Gambazon. For whatever reason, I did that all in green stuff. So I'm not sure why. I don't remember off the top of my head. I think maybe I thought that it being softer would help me achieve what I wanted easier, but I don't know. I mean, I don't know that it looks any different, better or worse than the Gambazon quilted pattern I did on the shoulders. So yeah, I don't know. But and the gun ended up not being quite as well. His hand looks so big and meaty, and that rifle looks so small and timid. Actually, in hindsight, looking at it, I'm actually a little concerned with how well it will cast because even though it's a decent sized rod, it's still pretty fine. But too late to go back now. Aha, I've been waiting to get to this miniature. So when I sculpted this miniature, it was around August 2008, and I had moved to Lafayette, where I lived briefly when I was going to college. Well, I guess whatever. Anyways, moved back to Lafayette, and I had done work for Battlestations. Really loved the game, played it some. But when I moved back to Lafayette, I was able to reconnect with my old gaming group, and we started up a campaign. And I just had so much fun that I wanted to sculpt my own character. I mean, I sculpted all the miniatures for the initial game, so I was like, hey, I'll sculpt the actual miniature or character that I'm playing. So I did that, and then I don't remember if it was that year or the year after, but I went and I met up with the guys at Battlestation again and pitched them this figure, and basically basically did it on spec, where nobody commissioned you, and to be fair, I wasn't sculpting it because I thought I'd get paid for it, but I was like, you know what, this turned out really great. Maybe they'd like a special looking Marine Battlestations guy, and so they did buy it off me. I don't know if it was ever produced though. I know I never got a copy, and I'm a little bummed because I really, in the end, what I really wanted was just to have this miniature to play on my in my campaigns of Battlestations. So, but I had a lot of fun, and it was neat to kind of dip my toe back into 15mm again. In some ways, this might be the closest thing I've ever done to a fan art piece, because I just sculpted something for a game line that I liked, and it was based on Arnold Schwarzenegger, and there you go. Thanks again for walking down memory lane with me in the second part of the 2008 Sculpting Archives. I'll see you again soon for part 3, but until then, remember, keep sculpting.